It was a day that no one could have predicted, and certainly not the kind of moment anyone would expect from Barron Trump. The young son of the famous Donald Trump, often kept away from the spotlight, was about to face a very public challenge. This wasn't just any challenge. It was a clash of beliefs. On one side, Barron, a young man known for his quiet nature and his deep faith, and on the other, an atheist professor who had built his reputation on ridiculing anyone who dared to believe in something beyond science. The stage was set in an academic debate, where Barron had been invited to speak about the importance of faith in a world that often favored logic and reason. His opponent, a well-known professor from a prestigious university, had made a career of challenging religious beliefs. He was known for his sharp wit, his quick tongue, and his ability to break down arguments with ease. Everyone in the audience knew that this was going to be a heated conversation. At first glance, most people thought the professor would easily win. Barron, after all, was just a young man, still finding his voice in the world. The professor, on the other hand, had years of experience and was famous for his ability to turn any argument into a victory. But there was something about Barron that no one could quite understand. His calm demeanor was different from what people expected. While others might have been nervous facing such a challenge, Barron remained composed, almost as if he was waiting for the right moment to speak. As the debate began, Barron stood tall, but he said little at first. The professor wasted no time, launching into a tirade about how faith was an outdated concept, something that had no place in the modern world. Believing in something you can't see or touch, the professor sneered, is nothing more than a crutch for the weak-minded. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the tension in the air. Some people had already started to feel uncomfortable, especially as the professor's words grew more personal. He wasn't just debating faith, he was mocking it. He was challenging Barron directly, hoping to get a reaction. And yet, Barron didn't flinch. His face remained calm, his eyes locked on the professor, absorbing every word. For a moment, it almost felt like the world was holding its breath. Would Barron respond? Would he stand up for what he believed in? Or would he let the professor's harsh words break him? The professor continued, his voice growing louder. Faith is nothing but fantasy. It's a way for people to escape reality. If you can't see it, it isn't real. And if you still believe in such nonsense, I pity you. The words stung, cutting through the air like a knife. Many in the room could feel the weight of the attack. But Barron, still silent, did not seem angry or upset. There was no sign of the frustration that others might have felt. Instead, he stood tall, his posture steady, his eyes locked on the professor. People in the audience started whispering to each other, wondering what Barron's response would be. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a test of character, a moment that could define Barron not just as the son of a former president, but as a young man standing firm in his own beliefs. The professor was clearly enjoying himself, thinking that he had already won the battle. He made one last jab, almost daring Barron to speak up. You've heard my views, Barron. What do you have to say for yourself? Are you going to keep hiding behind your faith, or are you going to face the truth? The entire room went silent. Everyone was waiting for Barron's response, knowing that this moment would define the course of the entire debate. Would he crumble under pressure, or would he surprise everyone? This was the moment, the unexpected encounter that no one had seen coming. Barron's reaction, whatever it would be, was about to change everything. The crowd waited in suspense, unsure of what would come next, and for Barron, this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The room was tense as the professor, certain of his superiority, looked down at Barron. The audience could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air. The professor wasn't just debating. He was attacking, and his words were sharp, meant to cut through Barron's faith and leave him speechless. Barron, however, still said nothing. His face remained calm, his posture steady. He was like a rock, unshaken by the storm around him. The professor, sensing the silence as a challenge, pushed even further. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you really believe in this fantasy world of yours?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you truly think there's something beyond this world we can't see? How does someone your age, with all the advancements in science, still cling to such outdated ideas?" The professor's words grew more cutting, and his tone became increasingly condescending. "You, a young man from a well-known family, are still holding on to the crutch of religion. How sad. I thought you were smarter than this. You're being held back by something that doesn't even exist. Faith is nothing but an illusion, a weakness." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected a debate, a discussion of ideas, but what they were witnessing now felt more like an attack on Barron's character. The professor's scorn wasn't just about his views on religion. It was about belittling Barron's very beliefs, trying to break him down in front of everyone. Some of the people in the room began to feel the tension. A few exchanged uneasy glances, while others waited to see how Barron would respond. Would he lash out? Would he get angry and defend himself? Or would he continue to remain silent, as if his faith was something so deep that no words could do it justice? The professor, growing more confident, couldn't resist taking one last jab. He turned to the audience, exaggerating his words. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the modern world. People like Barron Trump are living in the past, still holding on to something that should have been left behind. You can't believe in something just because it's comforting. You have to face the truth. The truth is that there's no evidence for any of it. Faith is nothing but a crutch for those who are too afraid to face reality." Barron still hadn't said a word, but the tension was palpable. His silence only seemed to fuel the professor's smugness. It was as though he was daring Barron to speak, to defend himself, to react in any way. The professor's confidence soared. He believed he had won this round. His sharp wit and clever arguments had the audience in his grasp. It seemed impossible that anyone could stand up to him after such an attack. Yet there was something about Barron's silence that left the room uneasy. No one knew what he was thinking, what he was feeling. His eyes never left the professor, but there was no anger, no visible emotion. It was as if he was waiting for the perfect moment to respond, but nobody knew when that moment would come. Was Barron even paying attention, or was he simply preparing something powerful that no one would expect? The professor's mocking tone rang out in the quiet room. "You can't possibly believe any of what I'm saying is wrong, can you, Barron? It's time to face the facts, and the fact is, faith is an outdated lie." The audience held its breath, unsure of what would happen next. The ball was in Barron's court now. Everyone knew that a response was coming. The question was, would Barron break under the pressure, or would he stand firm? Would his faith be a shield strong enough to defend him against such cruel mockery? As the professor finished speaking, the room was silent. The air felt thick with anticipation. Barron's response would be more than just a comeback. It would be a defining moment. Would he rise above the mockery, or would the professor's cruel words shatter his confidence? Everyone waited for the moment that would change everything. The room was filled with an unbearable silence as the professor finished his harsh remarks. His face showed no trace of humility, only satisfaction at what he believed to be a victory. He stood tall, arms crossed, waiting for Barron's response. The audience, too, was on edge. They had seen the professor tear into Barron's faith, but they had yet to hear what the young Trump would say. The tension was thick, as everyone waited for what seemed like the inevitable. Would Barron defend himself? Would he fight back with equal fervor? And then Barron spoke. His voice wasn't loud or brash. It was calm and steady, an unexpected tone after the professor's scorn. Barron didn't flinch, didn't get angry, nor did he let the professor's mocking words break him. He simply stood tall, his gaze unwavering, as he addressed the professor and the audience. "You say faith is a crutch," Barron began, his voice low but clear. "But I think it's more than that. Faith is not about weakness, it's about strength. It's about knowing that there's more to life than what we can see with our eyes or touch with our hands. Faith isn't something that can be measured by science, and it isn't something that you can prove with logic alone. It's something you feel deep down inside you. It's something that gives people hope, even when they're faced with the most difficult challenges. The professor scoffed, his eyes narrowing, expecting Barron's words to be weak and unconvincing. But Barron didn't stop there. He continued, his words gaining strength as he spoke. "I don't need evidence to know that my faith is real," Barron said. "I've seen how it changes lives, how it gives people purpose. My faith doesn't depend on what can be proven in a lab or written in a textbook. It's about something bigger, something that can't be contained by the limits of science. You might not understand that, but it doesn't make it any less real." The professor's expression shifted slightly. For a brief moment, his confident smirk faded as Barron's words hung in the air. The audience, too, was taken aback. No one had expected such a powerful response from the young man. It wasn't just the words Barron spoke, it was the way he said them. His voice was steady, and there was a calmness in his eyes that spoke volumes. He wasn't just defending his faith, he was speaking from a place of conviction, as though he had already made peace with the questions the professor was raising. The professor, clearly not accustomed to being outsmarted in such a way, tried to regain control of the conversation. "You're telling me that faith is something you can feel. That's not enough. People need facts. They need evidence. Belief isn't something you can just feel, Barron." But Barron remained unfazed. He wasn't about to be shaken by the professor's challenge. He continued, "You're right that people need facts, but not everything that's real can be touched or seen. There are things that go beyond what we understand. I don't need you to believe in my faith, but I don't think it's right to mock something that's given so many people peace and strength." The professor's expression hardened. He clearly wasn't prepared for Barron's calm but unwavering response. His attempt to provoke had failed, and now the audience was starting to notice. The professor had expected Barron to buckle under the pressure, to crumble in the face of mockery and ridicule, but Barron had stood his ground. He wasn't just defending his faith, he was defining what faith meant to him. For a moment, the professor said nothing. His sharp words had not broken Barron. Instead, they seemed to have backfired. The audience, once leaning toward the professor's side, now felt a shift. They were witnessing a different kind of strength, one that didn't rely on proving anything to anyone. It was the strength of conviction, of standing firm even when the world tries to tear you down. Barron's voice softened just a little as he finished. "I don't need to convince you or anyone else. I know what I believe, and that's enough for me." The silence that followed was deafening. The professor was momentarily speechless, as were the people in the room. Barron's words had done what few expected. They had disarmed his opponent with grace, confidence, and unwavering faith. The audience had come to see a debate, but what they were witnessing now was something far more powerful. A young man standing tall, not in the shadow of his family, but in the strength of his own beliefs. It was a response that would leave everyone thinking long after the debate ended. Barron Trump hadn't just held his own. He had reshaped the conversation. And in that moment, his quiet power became undeniable. As Barron finished his calm yet powerful response, the professor's smug expression slowly started to fade. For the first time, the professor was at a loss for words. His carefully rehearsed attacks and harsh mockery had failed to break Barron's composure, and now the audience could sense a shift in the room. The professor had expected to win this debate easily. After all, he had spent years deconstructing faith and religion with logic and science. But Barron's words had struck a chord, not just with the audience, but with the professor himself. There was an awkward pause as the professor adjusted his glasses, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, it seemed as if he was trying to regain his balance, searching for the right words to strike back. But nothing came. His sharp wit, which had so effortlessly torn apart other arguments in the past, was no match for Barron's calm and measured response. It was almost as if Barron's words had left him speechless. The professor, who had once stood confidently at the podium, now seemed to shrink in comparison to the quiet strength Barron exuded. The audience, sensing the shift, began to murmur among themselves. It was subtle at first. A few whispered comments, some confused glances exchanged between people sitting on opposite sides of the room. They had come to witness an intellectual clash, expecting a quick victory from the professor. But what they saw instead was something entirely different. Barron had proven that intellect and emotion weren't mutually exclusive. His response wasn't just a defense of his beliefs. It was a masterclass in humility, strength, and conviction. Some members of the audience, once skeptical of Barron, began to nod in quiet approval. They couldn't deny that Barron had won this round. The professor had tried to mock Barron's faith, but Barron had calmly turned the tables. It wasn't just about faith anymore. It was about something much bigger. It was about integrity, self-belief, and the courage to stand by one's principles, even in the face of ridicule. The professor, unable to recover from the blow, finally spoke, though his voice was now far less certain. "I didn't expect you to respond like that," he said, his words trailing off. "But that doesn't change the fact that faith is based on nothing but, well, hope, and the refusal to accept reality." He was grasping at straws now, his usual confident tone faltering. Barron didn't rush to speak again, as if giving the professor space to collect his thoughts. The audience waited, and the tension in the room grew. It was clear that the debate had shifted, not in favor of the professor, but in favor of Barron. The professor had tried to knock Barron off his feet, but in doing so, he had only revealed his own weakness. He had underestimated Barron, assuming that youth and faith would make him an easy target. But Barron had proven otherwise. And then Barron spoke again, his voice still calm but now filled with a quiet power that resonated throughout the room. "Faith isn't about avoiding reality," he said, his words cutting through the professor's uncertainty. "It's about embracing it, even when it's difficult. It's about knowing that there's something beyond what we can see with our eyes. Maybe it's something you don't understand, but that doesn't make it any less real." The professor's face flushed slightly, his expression a mix of frustration and disbelief. The crowd, however, had already begun to change their view. Barron's conviction and poise had been remarkable. While the professor had relied on his intellectual superiority, Barron had relied on something even stronger, his belief in something greater than himself. And that had made all the difference. As the debate continued, it became clear that the professor no longer had the upper hand. He was no longer attacking Barron's faith. Instead, he was trying to defend his own arguments, which now seemed weak in comparison. The audience, once divided, was now united in their admiration for Barron's strength. The shift was undeniable. Barron had won not just with words, but with the quiet confidence that came from within. His faith had not been a weakness, as the professor had hoped to prove, but a strength that no mockery or criticism could break. In that moment, Barron had not only defended his beliefs, but had also gained the respect of the audience. And as the debate drew to a close, the professor's defeat was becoming clear to everyone in the room. Barron Trump had shown that sometimes the greatest strength comes from simply standing firm in what you believe. As the debate wound down, the energy in the room shifted. The once overconfident professor now stood at the podium, visibly deflated. His sharp words, designed to tear down Barron's faith, had failed to achieve their intended effect. Instead, Barron had risen to the challenge with a strength and composure that left the audience in awe. The professor, who had been so certain of his victory, now seemed like a man caught in his own trap. The final moments of the debate were anticlimactic. The professor's attempts to regain control of the conversation were feeble at best. He offered a few half-hearted closing remarks, but they lacked the conviction they once had. Barron, on the other hand, remained calm and collected, his voice steady as he made his final point. "You don't need to understand someone's faith to respect it. But no matter what you say, it won't change what I believe. Faith is something personal. It's not for others to mock." And just like that, the room fell silent. The professor had no response. Barron's simple, yet powerful words had left him without a defense. The debate, which had started with so much tension and drama, ended with a profound sense of stillness. For the first time, Barron wasn't just a figure in the background. He had stepped into the spotlight and taken control of the narrative. As the debate ended, the audience began to filter out of the room, but the whispers of admiration for Barron's strength continued. Some people had arrived expecting to see him falter, to see the son of a former president crumble under the weight of such a public challenge. Instead, they witnessed a young man who stood firm in his beliefs, a man who didn't need to shout or argue to prove his point. Barron had not only held his ground, but he had also inspired those in the room with his calm resolve and unwavering conviction. The professor, on the other hand, made his way off the stage with a look of quiet frustration. It was clear that he hadn't expected Barron to handle the situation so gracefully. In fact, it seemed as if he had underestimated him entirely. The professor had hoped to expose Barron's faith as a weakness, something that could be easily torn apart with logic and reason. But instead, Barron had turned the tables, proving that faith, when it's truly felt, can't be reduced to mere arguments. Later that evening, the debate was the talk of social media and news outlets. Clips of Barron's response to the professor went viral, and the internet exploded with praise for the young Trump. People were fascinated by how Barron had managed to stay so composed under such intense pressure, how he had stood up for his faith without getting defensive or angry. Many praised him for showing a maturity beyond his years, while others admired his ability to remain grounded despite the harsh words thrown his way. But it wasn't just the public reaction that was notable. Barron's father, Donald Trump, reportedly watched the debate from the comfort of his home. Sources close to the family later revealed that the former president was deeply proud of his son, impressed by the strength Barron had shown. Donald Trump, known for his bold personality and combative nature, recognized the unique strength in Barron's approach. While Donald often used forceful tactics to win his battles, Barron had demonstrated that sometimes the greatest power comes from staying calm, collected, and true to one's beliefs. As the debate became a viral sensation, Barron's critics, who had once seen him as a quiet, reserved figure, began to reconsider their assumptions. Barron wasn't just a passive figure who stayed out of the limelight. He was someone with depth, someone who could stand up for what he believed in without backing down. His response had left a lasting impression on the world, showing that even the youngest among us can display a profound strength when they are grounded in their convictions. The professor, meanwhile, found himself at the center of criticism. Many began to question his approach to the debate, accusing him of crossing the line from intellectual discussion to personal mockery. His attempts to discredit Barron's faith were seen as mean-spirited and unnecessary. What had begun as a debate about religion had ended as a lesson in humility. The professor's failure to engage in a respectful dialogue was not lost on the audience, and it left many people reconsidering the importance of tolerance and respect in discussions about faith and belief. In the days following the debate, Barron Trump's quiet confidence continued to resonate with people all over the world. His calm, respectful defense of his faith in the face of ridicule had earned him a newfound respect, not just as the son of a former president, but as a young man who had found his voice and wasn't afraid to use it. For Barron, the debate wasn't just about defending his faith. It was about showing the world that sometimes strength comes in the most unexpected forms. The aftermath of the debate wasn't just about the immediate buzz of social media or the reactions from news outlets. What truly stood out was the long-term impact of Barron Trump's calm and powerful response. People from all walks of life began to reflect on the nature of faith, respect, and dialogue. Barron's ability to remain composed while defending his personal beliefs in such a public forum had sparked a deeper conversation about tolerance, faith, and intellectual discourse. The ripple effect began almost immediately. In classrooms, cafes, and offices across the country, people were discussing the debate. The initial shock of Barron's response soon gave way to admiration. It wasn't just Barron's unwavering stance on his faith that had made an impression. It was the dignity with which he held his ground. His response was an invitation for others to reconsider how they engage in discussions about faith and belief. Instead of attacking or belittling, Barron had shown that it was possible to engage in these conversations with respect and maturity. What struck many was the way Barron had redefined the rules of debate. The professor, a man known for his sharp intellect and strong opinions, had expected Barron to falter under pressure. Instead, Barron had done something few would have predicted. He had stayed grounded, his beliefs unshaken, and his respect for others' opinions intact. The most powerful moments of the debate weren't those of fiery exchanges, but of quiet strength and humility. Barron had shown that one's faith, when truly held, was not a weapon to be used against others, but a source of personal strength that could be shared without judgment. In private conversations, many people started questioning their own approach to discussions about faith and belief. It was easy to dismiss someone's views when you disagreed with them, but Barron's response had shown that disagreement didn't need to result in disrespect. Faith, or lack thereof, wasn't a reason to belittle others. It was an opportunity to learn from one another, to have meaningful conversations that didn't result in personal attacks. Barron had turned what was supposed to be a simple debate into a profound reflection on the way we communicate with one another in a divided world. Meanwhile, the professor, once the central figure of the debate, found himself facing his own consequences. The backlash against his mocking approach to Barron's faith was swift and widespread. Many felt that he had crossed the line between intellectual debate and personal insult, and this criticism led to some re-evaluation of his public persona. Colleagues and peers began to express discomfort with his treatment of Barron, and there were growing calls for more respectful, constructive debates in academic settings. The professor, who had once prided himself on his intellectual prowess, now found himself grappling with the consequences of his arrogance. Instead of being hailed as the brilliant debater, he had become the figure of ridicule, a cautionary tale about the dangers of dismissing someone's beliefs without trying to understand them. Barron had, in many ways, outshone him, not with elaborate arguments or counterpoints, but with a simple, unwavering expression of his personal convictions. While Barron's victory in the debate was undeniably significant, what followed was even more remarkable. The way he had conducted himself, calm, poised, and grounded in his beliefs, had inspired countless others to stand up for their values with dignity. Young people, particularly, found themselves empowered by Barron's approach. His response reminded them that standing firm in one's beliefs wasn't about winning arguments. It was about showing respect for others while remaining true to oneself. Barron had made it clear that real strength lay not in silencing others, but in speaking your truth with quiet confidence. As the debate continued to make waves in the media, Barron's influence began to extend beyond the confines of the academic world. People across the globe, including prominent public figures, began to comment on the event. Some praised Barron's maturity, while others applauded the clarity with which he had articulated his thoughts. His response had not only resonated with those who shared his beliefs, but also with those who did not. It was the universal message of respect, self-assurance, and personal integrity that touched so many. In the end, the debate had done something neither Barron nor the professor could have predicted. It had opened up a broader conversation about how we engage with others who hold different views. It was a reminder that intellectual discussions should be about exchanging ideas, not about attacking one another. And in this case, Barron Trump had shown the world that faith, when approached with respect and sincerity, had the power to transcend differences and foster understanding. Barron's quiet strength had changed the narrative. He had not only defended his faith, but also demonstrated the power of respect, conviction, and grace under pressure. His reaction to the professor's mockery had not just silenced his opponent. It had given voice to a new way of thinking about faith, dialogue, and the strength of personal beliefs. Weeks after the debate, the legacy of Barron Trump's moment of quiet defiance continued to ripple through public discourse. The event was no longer just about a single debate. It had become a turning point in how people approached faith, respect, and the ways in which we engage with ideas that challenge us. Barron's calm and powerful defense of his beliefs had sparked a broader movement that encouraged dialogue rooted in mutual respect and understanding. In the months that followed, Barron was invited to speak at various events, not as the son of a former president, but as a young man who had demonstrated the kind of maturity and wisdom that transcended political affiliations or family legacy. His words were not the grand speeches of a seasoned politician, but rather the thoughtful reflections of someone who had encountered mockery and judgment, yet chose to respond with strength, humility, and grace. At every appearance, Barron emphasized one key theme: respect for others' beliefs. He encouraged young people to find the courage to stand firm in their convictions, while also being open to learning from the perspectives of others. Barron's influence spread well beyond the debate stage. Students in schools and universities were now quoting his words, not just about faith, but about how to navigate complex conversations in a world that often seemed divided. His message was clear: you didn't need to be aggressive or confrontational to win a debate. Sometimes, simply standing your ground with dignity was more powerful than winning an argument. As Barron continued to speak out, many began to see him as a symbol of a new generation, one that embraced open dialogue, even when the conversations were difficult. He was not interested in becoming a political figure or gaining attention for himself. His motivation was simple: to show that faith could be a source of strength and unity, not division. His actions had proven that defending one's beliefs didn't have to be combative or disrespectful. Barron had already demonstrated that real courage was in having the strength to be yourself, even when faced with ridicule. At the same time, the professor's career began to take a hit. What had once been viewed as a brilliant, seasoned academic had now turned into a cautionary tale. The professor's mockery of Barron's faith had been seen by many as a bridge too far. His intellectual reputation, once respected, was now under scrutiny, as debates about respect in academic environments began to surface. People questioned the role of professors and intellectuals. Should they challenge beliefs, or should they foster understanding? Many agreed that while challenging ideas was necessary for intellectual growth, mocking individuals personally went too far. The professor's actions had not only harmed Barron, but had also tainted his own credibility. Meanwhile, Barron's father, Donald Trump, couldn't help but feel immense pride. Barron's reaction had made headlines in a way few had expected. Donald, known for his unapologetic style and willingness to clash with anyone who disagreed with him, recognized a different kind of strength in his son's response. Barron had handled the situation with a maturity and poise that left even his most vocal critics stunned. It was a quiet, powerful reminder that there was more than one way to stand up for what you believe in. Donald, despite his own controversial style, had to admit that Barron's approach had made a profound impact. The debate had not only elevated Barron's status, but also had a lasting effect on his family. His siblings, who had mostly stayed out of the public eye, were now looking at him in a new light. Barron had shown them that you didn't have to be in the spotlight to make a difference. His response had resonated with people, from everyday citizens to prominent figures, all of whom saw his strength as something to admire. And perhaps the most important shift was seen in the way the public approached conversations about faith. Barron's response had been a reminder that faith wasn't something to mock or dismiss. It was a deeply personal aspect of a person's identity, one that deserved respect, even if others didn't agree with it. Conversations about religion and belief were no longer something to be feared or avoided. They were opportunities for learning and growth. People began to realize that it was possible to disagree on a topic and still respect the other person's right to believe in it. Barron's legacy was now solidified. He had not only proven his own strength, but had also demonstrated how to bridge divides between people with differing opinions. He had done what few expected. He had turned a moment of conflict into a lesson in understanding and respect. The legacy of Barron Trump's stand would echo for years to come, not just as a moment of personal triumph, but as a turning point for how we engage with each other in today's polarized world.